characteristic of your regional whiskey that you like, and it will set you on the right path in the future. Now, if this is your first time to Scotland, or you haven't really been around Scotland yet, you can take it from me. It can be a phenomenally stunning country with lots of different regions and habitats and cool things to see, providing the weather holds up. And that plays a part into the sort of uniqueness of the whiskey that's made here. Now, we've got 5 regions that produce the single malt Scotch. We've got the Lowlands, the Highlands, Speyside, Islay, and Campbelltown. Now, Campbelltown just disappeared because I'm not going to be talking about that today, purely because it doesn't produce as much whiskey as it used to do. So we're just going to be focusing on the variety of whiskey coming out of the big 4 regions. I also gave you one of these cards when you came in, and if you haven't worked out already, it's kind of like a colour-coded scratch and sniff. So as we go around the different areas, you can have a rub of the card and a smell, and it'll give you an idea of what the sort of the biggest characteristic of that regional whiskey is going to be. Bear in mind these cards are quite exaggerated, so the chances of you smelling a banana-flavoured whiskey compared to what's on the card is a little bit far-fetched. It's just to give you a rough guideline. So we're going to begin in the Lowlands of Scotland, which is where we're sitting right now in Edinburgh. And the Lowlands is just separated by this invisible highland line running from the Clyde Estuary on the west coast to the Tay Estuary on the east. As you can see, there's only 5 single malt whiskey producers here in the Lowlands. The Lowland whiskey is very unique to this area. Usually it's quite light, it's very zesty, so it actually goes well on its own or with a little bit of ice. We'll make a start by giving this green section of your card a quick rub and a sniff. Your Lowland whiskey has this zestiness, almost like a citrus fruits, so your lemon peel, orange peel. Or Lowland whiskey can be a bit more mellow, almost like a bakery or patisserie with essences of biscuits, spices such as cinnamon, nutmeg, toast, and this underlying smoothness from the cereal grain. Now, the next region we're going to look at is the Highlands of Scotland. And the Highlands also include the islands of Orkney, Skye, Mull, Jura, and Arran. And the Highlands is essentially what you see on the postcards. It's these beautiful areas with the rivers and the lochs, but then you've also got your seacoasts and your cliffs, and your heather moorlands and Monroes. So from your inland highlands, you can get some very floral whiskey, quite heathery, but then out on the coast you can get some more intense, saltine, sea air-laden whiskies. So if you give that yellow section of your card a quick rub and a sniff, your Highland whiskey will usually have this sweetness running through it. That can be your essences of vanilla or undertones of honey or treacle. Some Highland whiskey can be a little bit nutty, and others you could even describe as perfumed or floral, depending on which area you're getting it from. So there's a lot of variety in the Highlands. Now this next area is Speyside. And while it's quite a small area just to the northwest of Aberdeen, it houses over 50% of all the single malt whiskey distilleries. The reason for this is you've got an abundance of fresh water coming out of this River Spey, but then you've also got a lot of barley coming in from the neighbouring agricultural communities. So those are your big key ingredients for making whiskey in the first place. And your Spey whiskey is typically quite fruity, almost a little bit sherried, and if you give that blue section of your card a quick rub and sniff, that fruitiness can come out either as an exotic fruit, so banana or pineapple. There could also be a green fruit as well, so pear, apple, grape, with some merging more into the darker fruit, raisins, plums, and spices, almost like a Christmas cake. Now this last region is the island of Islay. And Islay's the 5th largest island of Scotland, but it has 8 working distilleries. That's why it gets its own special area. What makes Islay whiskey so special or popular is they use a lot of peat in their malting process. They're also sat right next to the sea, So you've got that saltine sea air coming in through the casks all year round during maturation. Your Islay whiskey, you can usually tell as soon as it's put on the table. You give that red section a quick rub and a sniff. You just get this fieriness coming off of it. So that can be your smoky, intense smokiness, be it your peat smoke, or it can be your slightly softer, more mellow pipe smoke mixed in with dark fruit and dark chocolate. Now hopefully you've managed to pick out a flavour or a smell that you like from one of these regions, because at the end we're going to be doing our whiskey tasting. So you get to try one whiskey for that. Now, does anyone have a gold ticket? I don't think any of you do. Oh, you do? Okay, fantastic. Well, if you guys just come to me at the very end of the tour, then I can sort you out with all the other regions, all 4 regions of whiskey as well. And of course, if anyone wants to try the other 4 regions, they're more than welcome to upgrade at the end. So that was the areas in which the single malt is made. We're going to talk now about blended whiskey. Blended whiskey is what most of us, I think, started drinking whiskey on all those years ago, as it's very popular. We know the big names, we know the Johnny Walkers, the famous Grousers. And to give you an idea, it accounts for about 90% of all whiskey sales worldwide. So, a lot of it. But what is it? What is a blended whiskey? Well, you saw before, your single malt whiskey is made from your malted barley. There's another whiskey made here called grain whiskey. Grain whiskey is made from your cereal grains. So that's your wheat, your maize, your barley. And when you mix it with your single malt, that becomes your blended whiskey. Now the production of your grain whiskey is also a little bit different. So before, we saw those big copper pot stills that distill the single malt. Grain whiskey is made in what's called a continuous still. These things can be quite large, up to about 6 stories high, and, as the name suggests, produces whiskey continuously. So out of one of these, you're going to get around 10 bottles of grain whiskey every second. Now you compare that to your single malt, in the same amount of time, you're going to get around 1/3 of a measure. So grain whiskey is great stuff, very easy to drink on its own, very toffee, oaky. You can produce a lot of it, and importantly, it mixes extremely well with other whiskies. So it makes a perfect base for your blend. But in order to make your blended whiskey, to mix that grain with your single malt, you need somebody that knows the industry. And they need to know how this whiskey is going to change over time once it's been mixed. And also distilleries might change. Some might open up, old ones might shut down. And for that, we use a master blender. Now your master blender will typically make up this blend of about 70% grain whiskey to 30% single malt. So, if you want it to be a bit fruitier, you could add more Speyside, or more smoky and intense, you can put in more Islay. There's a lot of variety that can go into a blend, with one blended whiskey having between 15 and 50 different single malts added to it. So, while being a master blender is not an exact science as such, it's more of an alchemy. But it's a skill that he's learned over years of experience. And also, this experience is passed down through generations of blenders as well. So it's a very important and highly sought after role in the whiskey industry. Now once he's made up his blend, it'll usually go into oak casks to marry. And this marrying period isn't particularly long, between 3 to 6 months. This is just to get those flavours, those nuances coming together. It doesn't have to be that long, as the whiskey that's already being used is already Scotch whiskey. It's already spent at least 3 years in whiskey barrels in Scotland. This is just to ensure that the end product is going to be as balanced as possible. Now when you see an age statement on the bottle of blended whiskey, don't be put off if it looks like a young age, or even if there's no age on it at all. Your age statement on a blend is just showing you the youngest whiskey that's in that bottle. So, you've got a 12-year-old, chances are you're going to have older whiskies in there as well, 15, maybe even 18-year-old whiskies. Putting together a good blended whiskey is like assembling a good sports team. You need to have your young players or the young whiskies that are going to add that zest, the vibrancy and spice to your whiskey. But then you also need your older whiskies in there as well, because that's going to add your full bodiness and real staying power on the palate. So just to recap, your single malt whiskey is the product of malted barley from a single distillery. Your grain whiskey is the product of all the different cereal grains. And then your blended whiskey is just a combination of the two. So you could say your single malt is like your solo artist, and your blend is like the orchestra. And your master blender is just a composer, putting it all together, making sure that one whiskey isn't overshadowing the rest, making sure that it's the same year after year according to the recipe, and ensuring that it is as balanced as possible. Now, if your master blender was a composer, perhaps a piece of music might sound a little bit like this.